So new information comes out detailing how the Trump administration screwed up its initial response to the coronavirus pandemic. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. If you share my concerns, maybe you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, maybe even click that little bell that will notify you when I post something new. So we've heard lots of talk about how the Trump administration screwed up the initial response to the coronavirus pandemic. But a lot of those are kind of couched in generalities. And you hear this response from the supporters of Trump that, he instituted a ban on travel from China and he took these steps and really he didn't screw up anything that somebody else wouldn't have done. But now we have specific information about how the Trump administration screwed up this initial response, and it's pretty damning. The information came out in an internal review that the CDC conducted, looking at how it completely botched the initial development and distribution of coronavirus tests to identify people who are carrying the virus. You see, what happened is relatively early on in the virus, the Chinese had posted the genetic information about this virus online. And almost immediately, scientists around the world ended up developing tests that were able to identify it so that they'd be able to isolate the virus and stop it from spreading. Before too long, the World Health Organization, or WHO, had developed a list of as many as 60 different tests that could be used to identify the virus and was working on producing and distributing these tests worldwide. Now, testing can be critical in stopping the virus from spreading because, of course, if you can identify who has the virus and isolate them, then you can stop them from spreading it to other people, which then goes on and on. Now, the Trump administration, on the other hand, sticking to its America First policy, decided that it was not going to cooperate with the WHO and instead that we were going to create our own tests. Well, the Centers for Disease Control, or also known as the CDC, were tasked with developing that test. And rather than following the different tests that had been developed by researchers worldwide that were being used by the WHO with some success around the world, the CDC went with an entirely different system. They developed the test and started distributing it, only to find out that, guess what? The test didn't work. As it turns out, the test was plagued with manufacturing problems and design problems, but even worse than that, it produced both false negatives and false positives, which if you're going to try to use it to try to contain the virus, that's going to be a big problem. Before too long, the CDC ended up pulling back the tests, and the United States ended up testless, as opposed to other countries which had the successful WHO tests that were being used from the very beginning to identify and control the virus. This is part of the reason, by the way, why the virus spread so quickly in the United States as opposed to some other countries early on. Now, this initial failure, and again, let's be clear about this. This was a policy decision by the Trump administration that they were not going to cooperate with the international community in developing these tests, and instead we were going to go our own way, which led to this screw-up, is something that seriously set back the United States in its virus response. Now, we can debate whether Trump responded quickly enough or if maybe he was right not to cooperate in the lockdown efforts, etc., etc., etc. Personally, I think it's pretty clear that the lack of direction and lack of coordination coming from the White House were serious problems. And in fact, especially early on, the White House was quite happy to see the virus spread because, as Jared Kushner put it, this was a problem mainly in blue states as opposed to red states. And the Republicans in charge in the Trump White House were, of course, quite happy to see Democrats die. But one thing that is beyond dispute is the fact that we could have had tests available early on. We could have had an effective way of identifying and isolating people who were carriers of the virus. And instead, because of the refusal of the Trump administration to work with other countries, we ended up behind the curve in our response. This is something that's absolutely indisputable and is only highlighted by this recent internal review by the CDC. So these recent claims that, the Trump administration responded as well to the coronavirus as anybody could have, are just that, false revisionist history. And just to support my arguments, I'll post links to the articles I'm relying on down below. So feel free to spread this information to your MAGA supporters when they are defending Trump's response to the coronavirus pandemic. Well, if you agree with me or disagree with me or have any questions or comments, I'd love to see your comments down below. And I'll post a link to another video over here about Trump's incompetence in his administration. And if you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, that'd be a huge help. I'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.